Now that we have an understanding of how to select and manipulate the various parts of our models, let's take a look at a few of the slightly more advanced tools that can allow us to increase the amount of geometry on our objects. I'm just going to start by deleting the object that we created and just replacing it with another default cube. It's much easier to get an idea of the tools that we are learning by using more basic shapes. The tool in question that we're going to be looking at now is the Extrude tool. So go back to the edit mode for your new object and select the top face of your cube. Right now it's the only part of our geometry that is selected. However, if we were to grab the model, all of the connected geometry would be influenced by it. But we don't want to influence the rest of the geometry, instead we want to create new geometry, and we can do this by using the Extrude tool. This is located here in the tool shelf, which you'll notice has gotten a lot bigger, and we have a lot of additional tools that are exclusive to modelling in edit mode. This one right here is the Extrude region tool. Left click and we get a gizmo that has a white circle and also an extruded yellow circle with a plus sign within it. So if I click and drag on this plus sign, we can begin to extrude new geometry. If I go into edge select, you can see that we have the original edges here, but we've extruded up additional edges and faces from our original selection. And this allows us to further edit our models. For example, I can go back into my selection mode, hit the G key, and then manipulate how my object is shaped. And I've created a unique shape now just by extruding out some extra geometry. I wouldn't have been able to do this with the original cube. I can select any of these faces, even the ones that I have generated, and I can go back to my Extrude tool, click and drag to create even more new geometry. With the Extrude tool, we have the ability to create more advanced shapes than we could before, because we're able to actually increase the amount of geometry that we can play with. There is an alternative method to using the Extrude tool, however, and that is to use a hotkey. So let's say I wanted to select this face here and extrude it out using a hotkey. I'll just go into my normal selection mode so that we don't see the gizmo, and then I'm going to press the E key on my keyboard. Press E and I'll be able to extrude out my face to create new geometry. Now when we do this, you will notice that the blue line appears. The blue line represents the Z-axis, but in this case it doesn't represent the Z-axis of the 3D scene. Instead it represents what is known as the Z-normal, the direction that the face is pointing at. So here we extrude upwards because the original face was pointing up. If I select this face here, and then hit the E key to extrude, we're actually not going up the Z-axis of the 3D viewport, we're going along the Z-normal of that selected face because that's the way that it's pointing. Now let's take a look at another one of the tools that we have access to in edit mode, which is the Inset tool. The Inset tool is located in the tool shelf directly underneath the Extrude region tool. We can left click to enable it. What I can do here is I have just a white circle and I can just click and drag, and if I move in towards the center of my face, you can see that we create an inset. Now this is a form of extrusion where we extrude new geometry but then scale it down to the same location. So we end up with a border surrounding the new face. From here I could combine this with the Extrude tool. So I can go back to my Extrude tool and I can extrude out, or I could extrude in. So now I can actually create a more complex shape at the back here where I'm extruding my geometry into the object instead of out. These are just a couple of the tools that we are able to use in Blender, but they offer us so much additional functionality when it comes to actually creating new shapes in Blender. So what I'd like you to do now, before moving on to the next video, is just spend a little bit of time combining the Extrude and Inset tools and seeing what sort of shapes that you can come up with. Even without accessing any other tools, you can create shapes of an almost infinite number of varieties. And also, if you notice here, if you feel like you're trying to extrude out two faces to the same extent, you could always perhaps use the G key, lock it to an axis, and line it up. And that's just another way in which we can combine the Extrude tool with other tools in Blender. And that's what 3D modeling is. It's the ability to combine the various tools of your modeling software to create your shapes. One last thing that we neglected to mention was the ability to use a hotkey for the Inset tool. The hotkey for the Inset is the I key. So I can select a face, like this one, hit the I key to create an inset, and left click to confirm the inset positioning. Then I could extrude, or I could use another one of the tools that I've learned so far. For example, I could hit the G key and bring it up on the Z axis. And now we've got another shape added to our object.